Hello everyone! Welcome to our second part of the Space Invaders game tutorial. We're gonna start where we left off on the first tutorial. So I'm gonna open the project here. I'm gonna open uh, exactly where we left off on part 1. Here is Space Invaders. This one here. Let us let us remember what we did on the last part of the tutorial. So we created the background, we created the spaceship, the shots. But on this tutorial, we're gonna start making the game more interactive. So we're gonna create the asteroids. Yep, that's it, guys. We're gonna create the asteroids falling from the sky and going the direction of the player. So that's the first enemy. So we have the asteroids, and we also have the enemy spaceships. But I'm gonna create part by part, so we don't get too much on you. So it's better to divide it. So today we're gonna focus on the asteroids. If you didn't understand anything about the code, go back to the part 1, rewatch the video, because we're gonna continue exactly where we left off. So that's the main goal of the game that we want to create. First of all, we have to create the asteroids. The same, just like we did with the player and the shot, we have to create an object. That would be the asteroid. So we're gonna go new variable, and the asteroid, and this asteroid will be a create object. Oops, I'm sorry. Here, this one, create object. So we are creating an object, and we have to put the bitmap to the asteroid, the sprite of the asteroid. So we're gonna go set object bitmap, and the object will be asteroid. There's nothing new here, right? You guys remember that we did the same thing with the player and the shot. So we have to find the path where the assets are. So there is asteroid. That's how it was written down here. Let me check it. So we can go to the folder documents, Vizzcode, Space Invaders, so we can see all the assets that we have here. So that's the asteroid. I think it's misspelled here, no problem. Let me copy the way it is. Rename it, copy. And you can see that we have 3 different types of asteroids. We can mess with that later on. But for now, let's just use one single type of asteroids. So that's the name here, .png. So pay attention, because if you misspell, you may get a problem, because it won't pop up. But that's okay. I mean, if you type the wrong name and you try to compile and nothing happen, you can debug the problem, so you can go back to each step and see where the problem is. But okay, for now we are done here. We created the asteroid, but we know that if you compile the program and run, nothing will happen, because we just created the object. But we have to spawn the object. We have to put the asteroids on the screen. To do that, we're gonna go inside the game loop, because we want the asteroids to keep spawning on a certain rate, but we don't want a lot of asteroids at the same time. But we want the asteroids to keep going endlessly. Sorry. But there is one important thing to note, is that if you use the frame rate, you remember that the game usually goes from 30 to 60 frame per second, but that depends on the computer of the player. If the computer is running the game with a higher frame rate, and you say that from each 30 frames you spawn an asteroid, The player running the game with a higher frame rate will have it more difficult, because more asteroids will come, and a player running the game like in 30 frames per second will get 1 asteroids per second. So we have to figure out a way to use seconds instead of frames per second, because here on the while game is running, we know that it's gonna run per frame, but we don't want to use the frames, as I said. But fortunately, there is a function procedure, right, called get that delta seconds. It's really used on it's really common on game development, because this procedure will return the seconds instead of the frames. So this way you can say that I want an asteroid each second. So regardlessly of the player's frame rate, it will always get the same rate of asteroids. So this way you can have the game more balanced. But let's start creating the spawning the asteroids first. Would be easier. So I'm gonna get this like this, so we can organize the nodes. So let's start creating the delta seconds, delta second variable. So will be exactly like a timer asteroid, so we can measure the seconds. I thought of spawning the asteroids before setting the delta seconds, but I think the best way is setting the delta seconds, because you can see all the asteroids spawning first, and then we can make it move. So first we have to create a variable that will be a float variable that will mess with the will be the timer. So we get the delta seconds, so we can have just like a timer with the seconds. I'm gonna put every frame we'll get the delta seconds, so we can come here and set and add and set. So we're gonna go timer asteroid, and now we're gonna use the get delta seconds. So as I said on the last video, you guys can come to the Vizzcode website and go to the documentation, so you can see all about the procedures inside the game engine, and one of that's the get delta seconds. Oh, it's already here. So you can see everything about the get delta seconds. You can read it, so you can understand exactly what I said, and maybe there's more information here for you. So it's always good, if you don't understand how a procedure is working, to jump to the documentation and search for what you're looking for, or the procedure you're gonna use. So to test if it's really putting seconds inside the timer instead of frames, we can come here and draw a float. So the same way we have the print when we are using when you're using the console, we can have the print function. When we are using the game engine, we are opening a different window, so we have to draw the float instead of printing it. So it's just like that. We're gonna go here, the timer. So I'm gonna draw the value of the timer variable in the position 0, 0, size, okay, I think it's good, in decimals. If we compile, we should see the exactly, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's working just fine. And so now we have the get delta seconds working precisely. Now I have to spawn the asteroids. And we want to spawn the asteroids in a certain rate. There will be 2 asteroids per second. How are we gonna do that? At each 0.5 seconds we spawn an asteroid. So we can come here and create an if statement. So if it's greater or equal than, so if we get the timer is greater or equal than 0.5, so at each 0.5 seconds we're gonna enter here in this condition, what you have to do first is put the chronometer back to the old state. So we're gonna set and subtract that instead of set and add. Let me just push everything here. Let me organize. Oops. And I'm gonna put it here so it be clear for you guys. So the value is dot 5. So what it's doing is it's running here on the game loop. So each frame it's running this, and we get that delta second, so we can have a timer. So when the timer is bigger, greater or equal than .5, gonna enter here in this condition, and you're gonna set the timer back to its original position, so we can keep getting inside this if every half of the second. So now we have to spawn the asteroids. So we can call the spawn, but before calling the spawn, we have to think of where we're gonna spawn the asteroid. So here's the screen, right? Imagine that my screen is the game screen. We have the y-axis, so the y-axis goes like this. We have to spawn it in the top of the screen, so all the asteroids looks like it's falling. So the y-axis is constant, so we have to gonna set a number here that we put it here in the top, the y. But the x is the one that go like this, so the x can be random, right? We can put an asteroid here, an asteroid here, an asteroid here, so we can give this randomized flow to the game. So, and the y is constant, always here in the top, and the x is variable, it's random. So before we spawn, let's create a new variable here that is x, that we get a random value, a random int from -70 to 70. So this number depends on your screen. My screen, I figured that it goes so this point is -70, this one is -70, but maybe your window is larger, so you can test it here. So my numbers work this way here. So you also have to think of a number that will work on the player screen. So if it's on full HD, for example, that's the number that works good. And now we can spawn the object. So we're gonna spawn asteroid, so the ID is asteroid, and we're gonna spawn it in the position X that we just randomly created. So we don't have to import the random library, because the random is inside the game engine, the same way that the print procedures are inside the IO library, so we don't have to import random again. And the position Y is 35, the one that I think works good. So if I compile and run, you can see that it's spawning here for you guys. That's really good. On the tutorial, you're gonna see that they suggest 80, -80 to 80. You can also do that, so when it's falling, they can look it's falling from other parts of the screen. So I'm gonna put instead of -70, I'm gonna go 80. Maybe a little off screen, but don't worry about it, because it's gonna fall on the direction of the player. So now we have the asteroids spawning here, but we want the asteroids to go in the direction of the player. We don't want them to follow the player exactly, like the player is like this and the asteroid is going as a player, because that's not how the asteroids behave. But we want them to fall in the direction of the player, so you can get a little harder. So we're gonna go in a straight line, moving to the direction of the player. So that's what we're gonna do now. And to do that, we're gonna use a math function here. Let me see if this one here. So you can follow here on the tutorial. I just want to show you a picture here. So that's the asteroid position. We're gonna calculate using the vector, that's the player position minus the asteroid position. So when we spawn the asteroid, we want it to go direct to the player, but we also want to randomize the speed of the asteroid. So we're gonna say that if the asteroid is going here on the corner of the screen, it can go faster. If it's going on the center of the screen, it's gonna go a little slower. To do that, we have to add a multiplication value to the function. But so you guys understood what you have to do. Calculate here. If you don't understand the math behind this equation, don't worry, because that depends on your age, if you have that on your math class yet. But you can just copy and know how it's gonna work. So it's gonna go a straight line to the direction of the player at the moment that it was spawned. So you're gonna keep in a straight line. If you wanted to follow the player, we could add, for example, you want an enemy following the player, you can have calculating the new position at every frame, so we can gonna keep following the player like this. But if you want a straight line, you don't have to calculate every frame, just when it was created, and we're gonna set a velocity for the object. So to do that, we have to use the instance of the asteroid instead of the object, because it's gonna spawn a lot of different instances, and each instance will behave in a different way, because each instance have to move to a different location, because the player is gonna the player is a variable, right? So the position of the player is variable, because the player can move to different positions of the screen. So when we spawn that instance, we have to say, oh, go this direction. And when we spawn the next one, you're gonna go a different direction, because the player is moving to a different place. So it doesn't work like the shot, because the shot is always going up. It doesn't matter where the player is. The thing that matters is the spawn of the particle of the shot, because that depends on where the player is. But the velocity can be constant. But the asteroid, the velocity will be different, because it depends on the position, so we can calculate here. So we're gonna delete this spawn object, won't be this way. And now we need a multiplier variable, so we can multiply in the function, so we can give a randomized value to the speed of the asteroid. So you're gonna see that it's gonna look good on the game. So we're gonna go here, new variable, and we say let me see, we're gonna call it speed multiplier. So once we created the speed multiplier, we create a new variable here. There will be the asteroid instance, so the instance of the asteroid. So for that, we're gonna spawn an object. So we are spawning an object inside that instance. And what object do we want to spawn? We want to spawn an asteroid. Where do you want to spawn it? We want to spawn it in the X that we are randomized created here, so it depends on where we're gonna spawn. And the position, we can spawn it a little higher than the screen, so the player won't see the asteroid creating magically. Gonna create on top of the screen, and then it's gonna keep falling. So we changed a little bit the Y position here. So that's it. We spawned the asteroid. Now we have to set the speed of that instance of the asteroid. So we're gonna call the function get set instance velocity here, and to do that, we're gonna use this function here. So that's the equation that is represented here in this image. So there's the player position minus the asteroid position on X and Y, and there is also the multiplication speed multiplication that we add so it can looks different the speed too. So looks good. So what's the instance ID? That's the asteroid instance. Because of the scope of the code, at each frame, every time when it enters here, there will be a new instance created, so you don't have to worry about it. So when we left this scope, this will be destroyed and a new instance will be created, so you can use the same variable here. So that's different instance. So what we have to do is multiply, so we can get exactly the position where the player is. So that's the minus, that's the formula, right? So we get to the player x, we get the x of the asteroid, so exactly like it said here, player position minus x, that's the asteroid position on the x axis, and we wanted to multiply by the speed multiplier that we created. So that's the formula for the x, and the y it's just the same. So we can come here, we're gonna multiply here, and there is a minus here. First there is the player y. The player y depends on where the player is on the screen, because the player can move on the y axis, but the asteroid we know that we won't change. We always start on the top of the screen, because that's a constant value here. So we can put in minus 60, and we want to multiply by the speed multiplier. So I think it looks good. Let us test how the game will go. Oops, so we have a problem. That's good. I like when we have problems like this, because when you're developing a game or software, you're gonna face problems and you have to learn how to solve it. So in games particularly, it's super hard. I mean, it gets a lot of problems when you're developing it, so you have to learn how to solve these problems that you put in your code. So let's read. Try to operate on two variables of different types in this node. So the asteroid here have to be the int. Let us try. No, not int. Let's try float. Nope. So type mismatch argument instance ID. So let us see here. Let me check. So you're spawning. Oh, that's the problem here. That's float. That's auto. So the speed multiplier, it's a float value. I didn't initiate that value because it's .5, the value that we came up to see that it's a good multiplication value here. So I put it 0, so it thought as an int. So it was multiplying an int to a float. The player x is float, so you can multiply or operate on different types. So that's the problem that we had. So we just figured it out. So that was the node, because we were setting the velocity to that instance here. So I hope you understood the debugging process that we had. So let's run, and hopefully the game will go exactly as we planned. So you can see that the asteroids are going on different velocities. If we stop here, we're gonna see that all asteroids will go exactly where the player is. But because we are moving, the player and the asteroids are not following the player. It just follows exactly when it was spawned, like we talked about. So it's good, because it's hard because it's going kind of the direction of the player. If the player stops, we will die. But it's also kind of randomized, so it looks good. Now we have to do a lot of other stuff to improve the game. For example, destroying the asteroids and make the asteroids hit the player. But there will be something for the next part of the tutorial. I hope you understood everything that we did here. You can go back to this tutorial and watch it again if you had any problems. and you can also follow here on the embedded tutorial. So we did this creating asteroids part here on this video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you on the next video.